For more than 600 years, one empire fought almost non-stop. It clashed with kings and crusaders, rival sultans, rebellious provinces, and the rising powers of Europe. It expanded across 3 continents, lost territories, reclaimed others, rebuilt its borders repeatedly, and kept armies marching from the Balkans to North Africa, from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia. Yet, through all of this, the Ottoman Empire achieved something extraordinarily rare in history. It did not collapse under the cost of war. Most empires are not destroyed by defeat on the battlefield. They are destroyed by debt, inefficiency, corruption, and unsustainable military spending. Armies drain treasuries long before enemies breach walls. But the Ottomans understood this danger early, and instead of copying European financial models, they built a system where war largely paid for itself. The Ottoman Empire existed from around 1299 until 1922, longer than the Roman Empire and longer than the British Empire. But longevity alone is not the most fascinating part of their story. The real mystery is how a state that was almost constantly at war avoided financial ruin for centuries. To understand this, we must first understand what the Ottomans actually were, because for many people, the empire exists only as an image. Sultans in turbans, domed mosques, janissaries marching in formation. The spectacle is familiar, but the economic engine behind it is not. So let's slow down and begin at the start. The Ottomans began as a small frontier principality in northwest Anatolia, led by Osman, a local warlord commanding a few thousand fighters. He rose at exactly the right moment in history. The Byzantine Empire was weakening, Mongol power was retreating, and political authority across Anatolia was fractured. Osman and his followers moved quickly, capturing land and absorbing populations. These early conquests were not just military victories, they were financial gains. Every new territory brought farmland, crops, villages, trade routes, and taxable populations. From the beginning, Ottoman warfare was not merely an expense, it was a source of income. By the time the Ottomans captured Bursa in 1326 and crossed into Europe in the mid-14th century, they were no longer a small frontier group. They had become a rising regional power controlling key trade corridors between Europe and Asia. In medieval economics, this was equivalent to controlling the world's arteries. Silk from China, spices from India, carpets from Persia, timber, sugar, copper, horses, weapons, all of it passed through Ottoman lands, and every movement of goods generated tolls, customs duties, and taxes. The Ottomans may not have had unlimited resources, but they had something more important: constant cash flow. War requires food, metal, and manpower. The Ottomans didn't necessarily have more of these than their rivals, but they were better at turning geography into revenue. Still, wealth alone does not explain their endurance. Many rich empires collapsed under military costs. What made the Ottomans different was how they structured their military finances. This brings us to one of the most important innovations in Ottoman history, the timar system. In most states, the single greatest military expense is payroll. Soldiers must be paid, equipped, fed, and pensioned. The Ottomans largely avoided this burden by refusing to pay much of their army in cash. Instead, they paid soldiers in rights. A timar was essentially a tax district. A cavalry soldier, known as a sepai, was granted the right to collect taxes from a specific village or region. In return, he was responsible for equipping himself, maintaining his horse, and reporting for military campaigns when summoned. He received no salary from the central treasury. His income came directly from the land. This system was brilliant. It dramatically reduced state expenses, tied soldiers to local stability, and ensured predictable tax collection. If villages prospered, soldiers prospered. If they abused peasants, productivity fell, and so did their income. Most importantly, the empire could mobilize large armies without draining the treasury. European kingdoms relied heavily on mercenaries who demanded payment up front. When money ran out, loyalty vanished. The Ottomans avoided this trap. War didn't strain the system, it activated it. The timar system made Ottoman warfare relatively cheap, scalable, and sustainable, but it was only one half of the equation. The second pillar of Ottoman military finance was far more controversial: the janissary corps. The janissaries were elite professional infantry, highly disciplined, rigorously trained, and loyal directly to the Sultan. In a medieval world dominated by feudal levies and mercenaries, they were revolutionary. Their recruitment came through the debasement, often called the child levy. Christian boys from the Balkans were taken, converted to Islam, educated, and trained to serve the state. Ethically, this system was harsh and coercive, and it should not be romanticized. But financially, it achieved something extraordinary. The empire acquired elite soldiers without bearing the full economic cost of raising them from birth. Local communities bore the expense of childhood, while the state invested only during training and service. Once enlisted, janissaries were paid, housed, and supplied, but in early centuries they were forbidden from marrying or running businesses, limiting corruption and maintaining discipline. If the timar system made cavalry self-financing, the janissaries created a low-cost, high-efficiency professional infantry force. Together, these systems saved the empire enormous sums over centuries. Even more importantly, Ottoman expansion reinforced this model. Each conquest brought new taxpayers, new timars, new trade routes, ports, and tribute-paying regions. Unlike many European states, the Ottomans often emerged from wars wealthier than before. Trade amplified this effect. The empire controlled the Bosporus, the Dardanelles, the Eastern Mediterranean, the Red Sea, and major caravan routes to Persia and Central Asia. Anyone moving goods between Europe, Asia, or Africa passed through Ottoman-controlled choke points. By the 16th century, this made the empire one of the richest states on Earth. The Ottomans also relied on state monopolies. Essential goods like salt, coffee, tobacco, and sometimes soap were controlled directly by the state, ensuring steady and predictable revenue. These monopolies functioned much like modern strategic industries, similar to national oil companies today. Additionally, many regions operated as vassal states, paying annual tribute instead of being governed directly. This reduced administrative costs while still funding armies, fortresses, and fleets. For centuries, the Ottomans avoided one of history's greatest traps: heavy borrowing. They lived largely within their means. There was no massive national debt, no dependence on foreign lenders. But this balance did not last forever. From the late 17th century onward, the world changed. European powers industrialized. Trade routes shifted to the oceans, bypassing Ottoman land routes. The timar system decayed under corruption and weakened oversight. Janissaries accumulated wealth and political power, resisting reform and draining resources. When the empire finally tried to modernize its army along European lines, it needed something it had avoided for centuries: cash salaries. To fund them, it turned to foreign loans. In the 1800s, the Ottoman Empire borrowed heavily from European banks at high interest rates. Debt spiraled. In 1881, control of Ottoman finances was handed to an international commission dominated by Britain and France, a humiliating loss of sovereignty. The pattern is familiar. A power rises on discipline and innovation, ignores warning signs, and collapses when its financial system fails. And the lesson is still relevant today. Modern militaries outsource logistics to private contractors, reducing payroll burdens just as the Ottomans once did. Control of trade choke points from the Strait of Hormuz to the South China Sea remains a source of immense power. State monopolies live on through national energy companies and sovereign wealth funds. Resource-driven conflicts replace territorial conquest, and excessive borrowing still brings empires to their knees. Empires do not die on battlefields, they die on balance sheets. The Ottomans survived for 6 centuries because their financial system turned war into revenue. They fell when that system stopped working. History doesn't repeat, but if you fail to understand it, it will punish you all the same.